Hi, I'm Julie Hawks. Welcome to the Laws of Peace, where you will learn how to understand and apply God's laws in simple ways so that you can take small steps to create big changes and miracles and become the person you were always meant to be. The answers are in the scriptures. Let me show you how to find them. Today's episode is called Two Specific Laws That Create Financial Abundance. This month, our focus is on the law of obedience. Let's start by talking about what law is and why we want to follow it. Laws govern everything in the universe. There are laws around chemistry, laws around money, laws around health. Everything has laws. That we even have traffic laws that we follow. Imagine what it would be like if no one stopped at the red light or no one stopped at the stop sign. We would definitely have problems. We know that when we follow the laws that we can have good things happen, but we're actually following the laws whether we know what they are or not. So wouldn't it be worth it to know what the law is so that you can use the law to create? Laws have three parts. The law is instructions or directions of what we're going to do. And the law is also how we create. God creates with laws. And it's also how we receive. We use laws to create and receive. Let me give you a quick example. I want you to think about a financial advisor. A financial advisor is an expert on the laws of money. They understand interest rates. They understand the products that can create, that can compound the effect of money. They understand the stock market. They understand all of those things. And so when you give a financial advisor, a good one, your money, then he uses those laws to create more money so that you can receive more money back than what you started with. That's how law works. That's one example. I want to read you a quote from a man named Raymond Hollywell from a book called Working the Law. This is what he said. As you sow, so shall you reap. If you plant a corn seed, nature does not make a mistake and bring forth a giant oak tree. On the same reasoning, if you plant thoughts of worry, the law you obey will give you something to worry about. It will produce more and more circumstances to increase your worries. Whatever law you obey will in turn serve you. The most important thing is to know what law to obey. And so we're going to talk about two laws specifically that are tied to financial blessings. The first one is the law of the tithing. Now, a lot of times what we believe is that the law of tithing is a religious law. It is actually a universal law. And I would like to share a couple of quotes from one of my favorite authors on prosperity and abundance. Her name is Edwene Gaines, and she's hilarious. It's probably why I love her the most. Her book is called The Four Laws of Prosperity. And this is what she said. And by the way, she's not religious. The real purpose of the tithe is to acknowledge that God is the source of all our good and that we are aware and grateful for the good of our lives. We learn that we cannot outgive God. She said, the more you give, the more you surrender in faith to God, the more you receive. The sooner we tithe on income received, the sooner we make room for more to flow in. This is really, really interesting what she says about this. There is one of two things going on in the universe at all times. There is circulation or there is congestion. Think about what's happening in your life right now. If we hold on to our tithe, what we are saying to the universe is, don't send me anymore. I haven't tithed on this yet. And then she continues, how can I tithe when I can't even pay my bills? Do not allow your fear to paralyze you and keep you stuck in being less than you are. Tithe first and trust God to assist you in paying your bills. Be responsible about money and refuse to create debts that you feel guilty about. Read Malachi 3:10 over and over and make a new choice to believe. If you consider yourself on a fixed income, it is because you fixed it with your belief system. No one is excused from obeying spiritual law. Tithing, and then Charles Fillmore, he said this, tithing is based on a law that cannot fail, and it is the surest way ever found to demonstrate plenty, for it is God's own law and way of giving. What we need to understand about law is that it is sure. It is like it's math. 1 + 1 = 2. There is nothing that is going to change that. The law of gravity, if you step off the building, you can say, I don't believe in the law of gravity, but when you step off, guess what? You're going to fall. So law is very sure. And when we obey law, then we receive blessings. Next time, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we don't earn those blessings. We'll carry that on a little bit, but it's important to know that there is a law, and when we follow the law, we receive. And the first law is the law of tithing. And so I want you to consider that law and think about how you might be living it and how you might be able to live that at a better, higher level. Let's talk about the second law. The second law is the law of the Sabbath. Now, the law of the Sabbath is an interesting law because not everybody wants to live the law of the Sabbath. And there are a lot of temporal blessings that come from keeping the law of the Sabbath. In fact, let's just jump really fast into the scriptures and read about that. In Doctrine and Covenants, chapter 59, the first part, there are several verses that go through and explain what it means to live the law of the Sabbath and fast and all the parts and pieces to it. What I really want to focus on right here, right now, is the blessings that come from that. Starting in D&C 59, verse 16, this is what it says. Oh, let me get there. I thought I was in there. It says, verily I say that inasmuch as ye do this, the fullness of the earth is yours, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air, that which climbeth upon the trees and walketh upon the earth. Yea, the herb and the good things which come of the earth, whether for food or raiment, or for houses, or for barns, or for orchards, or for gardens, or for vineyards. Yea, all things that come of the earth in the season of are made for the benefit and use of man to gladden the heart. Basically, they're saying everything of the earth is yours as you keep the Sabbath day holy. There's a second blessing that comes from keeping the Sabbath day holy. Well, I'm sure there's lots of them, but another one is time. So much of of our lives is filled with busy and go and go and go and go and go, and we feel like we don't have enough time. But there's a quote by Russell M. Nilsson that is really interesting. He says, "I promise you that as you consistently give the Lord a generous portion of your time, he will multiply the remainder." And the time that he's asking for is on the Sabbath day. We must rest and rejuvenate to accomplish our work and mission on earth. Keeping the Sabbath day holy not only prevents burnout, it also connects us to God's love and to the voice of the Spirit so we can be guided and led forward. When done well, keeping the Sabbath day holy can provide mental rest and peace, as well as motivation for the week ahead. A lady named Jen Wilkin, in her book 10 Words to Live By, said this. She said, an inability or an unwillingness to cease from our labors is a confession of unbelief, an admission that we view ourselves as creator and sustainer of our own universe. That's powerful. Another way to look at the law of the Sabbath is the law of rest. And part of receiving is resting. There's a whole section about that we will talk about when we get to the law of giving and receiving. But it's important to know that if you need more money, if you want more financial resources, you need to pay your tithing and you need to keep the Sabbath day holy. I want to read one more quote that speaks more of a spiritual blessing that comes from keeping the Sabbath, or an indication of why the Sabbath day is so important. And this is from a guy named Marky Peterson, and he said this in May 1975 in a talk called The Sabbath Day. He said, this is very powerful. We can readily see that the observance of the Sabbath is an indication of the depth of our conversion. Our observance or non-observance of the Sabbath is an unerring measure of our attitude toward the Lord personally and toward his suffering in Gethsemane, his death on the cross, and his resurrection from the dead. It is a sign of whether we are Christians in very deed or whether our conversion is so shallow that the commemoration of his atoning sacrifice means little or nothing to us. So fascinating. So fascinating. I want to tell you a story that I found in a church magazine in 2015. And I really, really love this story because so many of the stories we read are all about, I did this one thing and then this huge miracle happened in my life and everything was better and everybody lived happily ever after. Unfortunately, in our own lives, it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't always work that, okay, I did the law, so immediately I'm going to get this blessing. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes the blessings don't show up the way we expect them to. God's timetable is different than ours, and it takes a lot of faith to trust that. And it also takes a lot of faith to see how the blessings really are coming when we expect them to come a certain way, and they don't. And so this story is called the story of the pea farmer. And it's the story, this son tells the story, he's the author, and he tells about his dad who was a farmer during the Depression. And he said, that the depression was difficult, that their family struggled. Like I said, his dad was a farmer. And while everyone was struggling, they still had food, they still had clothes, they still had a place to live. And so they felt very blessed. But their dad had gone into great debt. And he came up with this idea that he was going to plant this giant pea farm. And with the resources that came from the harvest, he was going to be able to pay off all of his debt and get caught up. And part of the plan was that he was in a co-op with his neighbors, and the neighbors would each go, all the neighbors together would go to each farm individually and harvest each farm all together as a group. And this man, his farm had fallen to be the very last to be harvested. And the day that it was to be harvested was a Sunday. And so Saturday night, this son remembers his parents talking Saturday night and talking about why they needed to harvest this crop on Sunday, and that it was late in the year, that it needed to be harvested. The father felt like that this was like the ox and the mire story, that it would be okay to go ahead and do this on the Sabbath. And his wife didn't give him a hard time about it. She just seemed disappointed. So the next morning, they wake up to go to the church, and the two boys and the mom get dressed and get ready for church, and the husband does too. And he goes to church. And while they're in church, a giant storm, a hailstorm comes and destroys the entire crop. It's gone, all of it, just gone. And so you're thinking in your head, wait a minute, but he kept the law of the Sabbath. Shouldn't he have gotten the crops? Shouldn't he have had all the money he needed to pay off the debt? Wait a minute, didn't God answer his prayers? Wait a minute, aren't there any blessings? Do blessings just not come from keeping the Sabbath day holy? Wait a minute, this isn't how this story is supposed to go. Do you have a story like that in your own life? Has that ever happened to you before? You're like, okay, I'm going to live the law, and then this awesome, great blessing is going to come, and then it doesn't? Then what? Well, the remainder of the story is really interesting. There's a quote from the son, and this is what he said. He said, that could have been a severe test of faith for any father. He had honored the Sabbath, expecting that by doing so, he would bring down a blessing from heaven. And instead, he received a ruinous hailstorm and the financial disaster that it brought with him. He continues. I have observed other men give way to outbursts of temper or profanity or even threats of violence in reaction to some misfortune or supposed injustice. My father's response in similar circumstances was typically to sigh heavily, shrug his shoulders, and start over on whatever task was at hand. The loss of my father's pea crop, though far greater in magnitude than any other things that had gone wrong, was still met with patience and a firm faith that God had better things in mind for him, which would sooner or later come to pass. And they did. He goes on to tell the story that his dad decided to enter a training program for mechanics because he had a natural ability in mechanical skills. And this happened right before World War II. And so they moved to San Diego, where his dad got a job working in the wartime aircraft industry, and he was able to steadily improve the financial life of their family over the years. They never went without. They always had what they needed. And the son, the author of the story, goes on to tell us that he met his wife in San Diego. And I think it's a beautiful example that while God doesn't always answer our prayers the way that we hope that he will, he is very much involved in the details of our lives. And as we live these laws, we cannot but help to receive the blessings that come from them. There is a scripture in Doctrine and Covenants 82:10 that says, I, the Lord, am bound when you do what I say, but when you do not what I say, ye have no promise. And so I have two questions that I want to end with that I really want you to ponder on, to pray about, to journal about, to have a conversation with somebody you love about. And here they are. What promises are tied to the law of tithing and the law of Sabbath that I need in my life right now? And then the second one is, how can I live these laws in a more consistent and holier way? Thank you so much for being here. If you have enjoyed this podcast, you will love my monthly membership. We are focusing on the law of obedience, and we are diving deep, deep, deep into the law a little bit more than we can in this podcast. This month, we are talking about personal commandments and how they help us overcome perfectionism. How do we know what a personal commandment is? How do we know what our personal commandments are? How do we find those and how do we live those? So if you would like more information about the laws of peace, you can find those in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. Share this with someone you love.